Good evening, everyone. It's good to be here with you. I have been so thoroughly blessed. Thank you for being used, Pastor Eugene. My heart has been touched and my mind has been inspired. So thank you for being a tool in the Lord's hand. There's been a bit of a theme, even though it wasn't planned. I don't know if you've caught on. There's been a theme with the health nuggets. There's been a lot of people talking about the gut, the stomach, right? And it wasn't planned at all, but there just seems to be something that's important about that. And I'm going to touch on it a little bit today, but in a different context. Today I'd like to speak to you a little bit about depression, but from a practical point of view, things that are in our capacity, in our control to actually affect whether our brains are okay or they become more depressed. Now, it's important to realize that there are things that are out of our control, right? I'm sure you've all heard of baby blues. You know, when a lady gives birth, her hormones are all over the place, and depression is often something that they experience. And it's because the estrogen lowers so much that that's the effect that it has on the brain. So hormones definitely have an impact, and often those are not things that we can really control. So there are factors that we can't control, but there are some that we can. And today I'd like to touch on two, and then there are some that I'll just mention like sort of in passing. One of the things that I'll just mention in passing is stimulants, right? Our brains, like Cedric was saying the other day, our bodies like routine. Our stomachs get used to digesting really well if we eat at the same time, because then it prepares itself and it can digest well. Our brains aren't any different, and they like consistency, especially with our blood sugar. But when we use stimulants like alcohol or tobacco or even coffee and black teas, we have this sort of pendulum effect on our brain. We're using resources that we haven't earned yet. So it goes into stimulant, but then it doesn't come back to base, it goes to depressed, right? So you have this constant seesaw effect in your brain. We are helping our brains to be depressed. So that's one of them that's just I wanted to touch on. But the other two that I really wanted to focus on, the first one is screens. I think we take for granted the effect that screens have on our minds. It can be TV, because we're just sitting there with what we think is stimulation, but often it's just screens. Yeah, it's just something that's just processing. Our phones, you know, and we can so easily say, yeah, but this is work. This is, you know, I have to respond to this message and that message, or be on Instagram, and, you know, we're looking at the right things. I've got lots of channels for healthy food, but we spend so much time on that it actually affects our minds to the point where they actually start becoming depressed. They become unable to concentrate. We start losing the capacity to have memory. We start becoming forgetful. We can't retain information, and that's because of the screen time. And they've actually shown that the younger the children start on screens, by the time they get to sort of starting school age and 9 years and old, they can't focus because of the screen time they've had leading up to that. So those are things within our control that we can use to change. So if we have to be intentional, because it's things that suck us in. So screen time is something that you want to be intentional about unplugging, right? There has to be a safe space in your day, in your life, where there are just no screens. And those are things that we can control. Depression, I'm sure you can agree with me, and anxiety are becoming very widespread. Every second person that you speak to, if you speak to them long enough, they'll say they might even be on medication for it. And it's because of all these bombardments and things that we have coming into our life. And then the last one that I'd like to share with you, and I'm going to invite some very brave volunteers to come forward. Come. This is our PowerPoint tonight. We're going to have a demonstration. So I'd like to introduce you. I'd like to introduce you to stomach. Thank you. And to brain. Okay, this is brain. And stomach and brain are going to help us bring a point across. Now, we are just behind the scenes. They are going to do pull-ups for us. I don't know how many of you can actually do pull-ups. We won't expose anybody. And we're going to see how many they can do, but I'd like you to do at least 10. Is that okay? Okay. So you could see that there was a little bit of theatrics there. But the point I wanted to make is this. Sometimes what we do to our stomach requires our brain to get involved. Okay? So when we eat too much, our stomachs are working really hard. And when they can't cope anymore and they can't finish the digestion, they actually call on the brain to help finish. So now the brain can't do what it's meant to do and has got to come and help the stomach finish digesting. So Matthew was helping Jonathan finish his 10. By the time he had to do his, he was tired-ish. He was tired, okay? And that's what happens to our brains. Every time we overeat, we're putting strain on our brains. And this starts pushing our brains into depression as well. The more we overeat, the more we tax our body. Our body gets clogged up. And there's a very intimate link between our stomachs and our minds. If you have a tired stomach, you have a tired mind. If you have a sick stomach, you have a sick brain. So choosing how much we eat, choosing what we put into our stomach, and what we ingest, these are things that are in our control to help our minds stay strong. Without our minds, we are nothing. The rest of our body doesn't function without our brains being okay. So let's consider carefully the things that we put into our mouths that are in our control, because they have a huge impact on our emotions and the mood that we have.